nutrition and how to eat. The purpose of eating is to nourish the body and to cleanse the body. It's a dual purpose, nourishing and cleansing. It establishes the health and gives you harmony. And knowing the relationship between what you eat and the reaction in your body is what nutrition is all about. But first we got to get the food in the system. First we got to get it out of the tube, the hot air tube that you call your digestive system, and into the body. So we have to first know how to eat properly, because that's the key to health. That's the key to nourishing your body as well as cleansing your body. Unfortunately, we are in what is commonly called a junk food environment. We're in the European dietary setting, and basically we follow their dietary rules, their rules for combining food, and their rules for eating. We use the food to make us ill, and then we use the drugs to suppress the illness, and then we return back to the illness that was suppressed is coming out again. So we're in a vicious cycle. The Europeans go from a disease to another disease and back to a disease, whereas in the African setting we come from a point of health, and then we may get ill, and then we use herbs to come back to health again. Whereas in this European dietary enslavement which we're in, we go from disease to another disease, to a lesser disease, to a greater disease, to a lesser disease, in a vicious cycle. And we usually take the synthetic drugs, which are known as suppressive therapy, which keeps the toxins in the system. The point of the matter is, if we eat properly, the food is our medicine. If we eat properly, our pineal gland is nourished, our mental system is balanced, we're not irritated, whereas junk foods and drugs irritate the mental system, the nervous system, the mind, the brain, as you call it. So we're going to just overview the digestive system so we can have an understanding of it, so we have an understanding how it works, how to nourish it, how to keep it clean with bulk foods, with enough water in the body. So let's just look at some of the parts of the digestive system itself. We'll start off fundamentally with the colon, as we call it, which is the large intestines. It's in the part of your body that you call your stomach, which is down here. You call this your stomach. This is your large intestines and your small intestines, which some people, such as Europeans, call your gut, and you call it your stomach. Your stomach is up higher behind the rib cages, where the colon, large intestines, and small intestines is here. That's the key. This is how a healthy large intestines is shaped. And when it's not in a healthy condition, it can cause constipation, and it causes a lot of mucus to accumulate, causes low blood pressure and high blood pressure. And when it's abused thoroughly by the diet, which is constipating, the processed food diet being very constipating, parts of it collapse, and it loses its function ability. These parts of the colon help bring nourishment into the body, and when they are not functioning or collapsed or filled with plaque, they cannot bring the right nutrients in the body and cannot nourish your brain, your spleen, your pancreas, and all the other organs correctly. Maybe we should just look at those organs and see how they function. But first of all, let me clear it up a little for you. Let's just look at this hot air tube called the digestive system. We start here at the mouth, and we have the teeth, and we masticate the food to get nourishment from it. We don't eat the food. To eat the food is to think that the food becomes a part of your body, but a plant does not become a human cell, and a human cell does not become a plant. The food does not become a part of your body, it merely excites the energy in your body. It doesn't give you energy, it excites the energy. And when you take junk food, it takes away from your energy. By junk food, I mean food that's highly processed, such as bleached white flour, white sugar, salt, which is a rock fossil, which is broken down or milled and caused to be in a powder form. It's basically a rock, and it gets washed out to the sea and collects into seaweeds, and you eat the rock in that form. But it's not a part of your healthy diet. The salt that's in the fruits and vegetables can be eaten, but to put salt on the food simply deters or takes away from the digestive process. As I mentioned, you masticate or chew the food and get it in a liquid form. You don't chew the food unless you don't put the food in your mouth unless you intend to break it up and put it in a liquid form. Chewing big chunks and then swallowing it doesn't allow it to be fully insolidated by the digestive glands around your mouth. And it goes down and down and gets into your stomach. And once it's in your stomach, it leaves your stomach and goes into the small intestines, which is right here. And after it leaves the small intestines, it goes into the large intestines, the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, into the rectum and out of the body. That's the process of digestion. As the food passes along, certain digestive enzymes are put in it from the liver, which makes bile, and from the spleen, which makes another substance, and from the pancreas, it puts more digestive enzymes in it until it gets into the small intestines where it's alkaline. So we have this hot air tube that the food is in, but it's not in the body. It's sort of like the pipes in your house, the water pipes. The water is in the pipes, but the water is not in the house. So what we're doing in digestion is getting the water out of the pipes into the house, into the body, or temple as it's called in Africa. This is an example of a colon, an abnormal colon of a 36-year-old woman. You see, this part of it is completely malfunctioning, which causes low blood pressure. You can see the relationship of the colon to the body. This part is related to the bladder. So when there's problems in this area, you're going to have problems with your bladder. Then you move up to here. It's related to your kidney and pancreas. Then you move up to the area, the middle part, which is called the transverse colon, related to your stomach. Then you're moving up your body to the higher part of your body where the heart is and the liver. And then you're moving further up your body to where your eyes and your sinus is. So we have the upper part of your body, the middle part of your body, and the lower part of your body. This has a direct converse relationship, and you may see it on different charts written different ways because they will show the complementary organ to, say, the kidney. Kidney has a complementary organ. The lungs' complementary organ is the large intestines. Each organ has an organ that it complements or works well with. So, but these individual sections of the colon feeds sections of your body, as this chart is indicating. The pancreas is fed here. And the pancreas, of course, makes insulin. It helps break down carbohydrates. And the adrenal glands makes adrenaline, which helps stimulate your system when it's in danger. It helps protect you. So you're losing your protective mechanism by eating foods that lack fiber, such as refined carbohydrates known as bleached white flour, and another refined carbohydrate known as white sugar, and salt, which helps dehydrate the system. All of these substances stop the digestive process and inhibits your body and stops it from getting the nutrients that it requires in order to stimulate your health. Now let's look at this healthy colon so you can see. See, as I mentioned before, this is the lower part of your body. You have the prostate, the bladder, the testes, the genital organs, and then you have the kidney, and it's the pelvis girdle, as they call it, adrenal glands, the pancreas, the spleen. Then you get into the middle part of the colon, which is called the transverse colon, the stomach, the lungs, the heart, and then you're getting into the other organs in the body, the glands in the higher part of your body, the nasal passage, the thymus gland, and all this is in the upper part of your body. As you can see, the eyes and the ears are here. This is what a healthy colon should look like. If you're eating a 70% raw food diet, steaming your vegetables slightly, and not overcooking them, and not eating a lot of constipating additives known as behavior modifiers or dyes and preservatives. In any case, we move along in the large intestines. Now we have the ileocecal valve, This is a valve that separates the large intestines from the small intestines. And the valve is right here. And what helps control this valve is a substance known as chlorophyll. It keeps the valves, stops the valves from sticking together, keeps them free. And you only find chlorophyll in raw fruits and vegetables. A lot of green leaves and green plants have it. And it helps the valves all over the body stay free. However, when you eat the constipating junk food, it ferments and forms gas and rots and worms get in the body. And this gland right here, known as the appendix, squirts an antibiotic that tries to protect the large intestines from the infectious conditions. But when it's overabused and overworked, it sometimes swells and gets inflamed, and then you have to have your appendix removed. This is a cross-section here of the appendix to let you see the glandular networks. You have this lymphatic fluid, which is helped to circulate in the body by a herb called echinacea. And the lymphatic fluid is secreted, and it helps protect the body. It's mostly used in defense. This is the cecum here, the name they've given to the large intestines there. Now, as I mentioned before, we were talking about the worms that collect, and here they are, right here. And here's the appendix here. This is the small intestines. The food leaves here and goes into the large intestines. And since it's fermenting and rotting, the worms come as a defense reaction in the body to get rid of those toxic matters, and they eat it up. But the thing that stops these worms from coming in the body is known as digestive enzymes, and they are found in raw fruits and vegetables. The worms do not like raw food, and they will leave. But when you're on a constipating junk food diet, you will have these parasites, and heat does not kill them. Not the staphylococcus and certain bacteria and worms, especially the tapeworm, which is the most dangerous one that comes from fish. They will kill you. These worms are very happy when you have all this liquid manure, which you call mucus, floating in your bloodstream. Raw foods will stop this. An African-centered diet with plenty of juicy, watery fruits such as mango, papaya, plantain, bananas will help this condition not occur. Again, we are back to the small intestines, the ileocecal valve, the cecum, and the appendix in a healthy person. Now we're going to start from the top. We're starting with the digestive system. We're masticating the food. Here are the tonsils that sit on the side, another part of the lymphatic system that squirts enzymes and helps get rid of impurities in the system. And we have the tongue. This is looking at it from behind, looking out sort of. So it may be kind of difficult for you to visualize. Let's go to another slide. Maybe you can see what I'm talking about here. This is the gallbladder. Now the gallbladder is, when you spread it open, it looks like this. But nonetheless, the gallbladder just stores liquid that's made by the liver, which is called bile. Bile is made from damaged red blood cells, and it collects there. And it's used to emulsify fats and proteins and carbohydrates. That's known as bile, made in the liver. And it's also used to get rid of the cholesterol level. It lowers it. That's bile. A very important digestive enzyme. The bile, as I mentioned, digests the fats and the carbohydrates, and it makes that pigment, highly pigmented. This is the spleen, as you can see. They have sides to it, and this is called a diaphragmatic surface. They have various names to it, but the overall function of it, the spleen, is to help protect your body. It deals with a fine type of red blood cells that is made during pregnancy by the spleen. The spleen has lymphocytes, which destroys impurities in your body. It removes old blood cells and can make blood cells, as well as I mentioned those fine red blood cells that are utilized during pregnancy. These are the two kidneys. They're related to the two testicles in the body and the two ovaries in the bodies, and they're related to the eyes. Those are likes, treating likes, known in the Hahnemann system of homeopathic medicine. These are the adrenal glands, as I mentioned before, that helps your body fight in various conditions of danger. Now, by various conditions, I mean if you were threatened by a lion and you were in a room, the adrenal glands would secrete adrenaline. But also, a dangerous condition can be something wrong with the liver. And in that case, the body reads a threat to its life, and the adrenal glands again fire off and secrete. Or another threat to the body could be hypertension or hyperstress conditions. Again, the adrenal glands interpret that as a threat to its life or health, and they fire off again. And they sit right on top of the kidneys, the right kidney and the left kidneys. This is the inside of the kidneys, a section. And of course, it filters out waste and recycles the electrolytes or minerals which are highly charged, positive and negative substances, which are called electrolytes. And the urine is separated from the blood and passed down the ureters down into the bladder, where it's stored until the bladder feels full, distended. In that case, the sphincter muscle opens up and lets the urine out. That's what you call the urea is also a part of this urine, which is a part of the liquid waste of the body. That's the kidneys. Now we're into the stomach. We've chewed the food, we've got it in a liquid form called chyme, and it comes down the esophagus, past the cardiac sphincter muscle, and into the stomach, which is about the size of the fist. And it has various names for the stomach. But the stomach doesn't digest the food, it merely salivates it, wraps it with mucus, and gives it a timing, so that when you eat a meal, that meal is wrapped in mucus and given a kind of a code number for the digestion order. Then you eat another food and it's wrapped in mucus and is given a code sort of thing, so the body knows which one to digest first. And that causes things to be in a waiting order. And the food generally should stay in the stomach 4 hours. And then after 4 hours, it goes into the small intestines where it stays 4 hours, and then it passes out of the body. It should be within 44 hours, which is pretty long. In other countries where they eat more of a raw food diet, it's in 26 hours. But in this country, it goes from 44 hours to 72 hours, basically 3 days, because of the constipating nature of the European junk food diet. So the transient time, or the time it takes from the food to leave your mouth and pass through the stomach, through the small intestines, large intestine, which is called the colon, stored in the rectum, and passing out through your anus, should be between 26 to 40 hours, which is not all that good. And then when you're on a junk food diet, or a diet that doesn't have enough roughage and fiber and not enough water, the digestive time is between 44 and 72 hours in this country, which is constipating, which causes diseases. As Hippocrates, the father of European medicine, said, 90% of all illnesses are caused by constipation. He said that over 600 years ago, and today, 90% of all illnesses, diabetes mellitus, and diverticulosis, and all those other diseases that we think attack us are basically digestive diseases caused by not having an understanding of the cycle of the digestive system. Now we're getting into the pancreas, which is mostly diseased in this country. It's overworked. It's a nice gland. This is the spleen, as we went over before, and the kidneys sitting right here, and duodenum right here. But we're getting into the pancreas, and this is a cross-section of it right here. Over here we have the gallbladder, and the adrenals on top of the kidneys. Here's the other adrenals there, and we have the liver. Basically, we have one major organ on the right side, and all the other organs in the body are on the left, the spleen, the pancreas, and the liver is on the right. Nonetheless, here in the pancreas is where most of the problems are. The problem occurs because of the refined carbohydrates. When you refine the carbohydrates, you make them into a partial food, and you make them into a sugar, which is a drug. And the thing that's needed to burn the sugar is the insulin, and this organ is responsible for the insulin. There are herbs that help make the insulin as well, golden seal, yarrow, red raspberry. They help stimulate the insulin production. However, when you're overworking the pancreas, it becomes heated, or thermal fatigue, and then it starts to deteriorate, and then its function starts to decline, and it no longer can keep up with the amount of sugar that's being dumped in the system, and it becomes weak, and it develops an insulin insufficiency, which we call diabetes mellitus. Enzyme by the name of lipase is what the person is lacking, is having pancreas disease known as diabetes mellitus. The pancreas gives us juice, gives the insulin, and it helps make the glucagon, which is a storage form of carbohydrates. It is very much abused in this country. It also helps to increase the bicarbonate effect, ion, and alkalines the food in the intestines, the pancreas does. So we lose all of these functions when it's ill. This is the thymus gland. It increases in size during pregnancy and during lactation, and is quite active in children. But once you reach adulthood, Europeans, the thymus activity decreases. We can use arginine and lysine to help stimulate the thymus to activate it again. However, it decreases in its activity and its protective mechanism of the body because it is visualized by the Europeans as having no longer a functional ability in the body. But it will function if you will give it certain nutrients. They also give a thymus gland, which is part of the using the organs of other animals to help your body. They're using the organs of pigs today. They're injecting the pigs with certain genes from humans into the eggs of the pigs so they can become more adapted to the human body, and that way they can grow a pig that they can use to help a person who has a diseased pancreas or liver or whatever organ, and they can transplant the organ from the pig easily because it allegedly is more adapted to the human body since they're putting the human genes in the pig's ovaries. This is part of the European belief that a plant can become a part of the human body and another animal's body can become a part of your body. This is strictly a religious belief and is totally unfounded, but in any case they are using pigs' bodies to replace worn-out organs in this country and in European countries today. The thymus is for the immune system, as I mentioned before. It helps to defend the body against toxins and waste. And that is also the responsibility of the liver, because the liver first gets the blood from the intestines in the form of food, which is absorbed in the intestines, and nutrients, and all those nutrients go to the liver. And it makes the amino acids and removes the glucose and stores it for the body so it can use it in an emergency crisis. You should have at least a 6-hour supply of glucose stored in the liver for crises. And the liver also detects damaged red blood cells, as I mentioned before, and it stores vitamin B12, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. And this helps to defend your body in a crisis. However, since the liver is damaged and toxic, Europeans are now beginning to rely on the thymus by using thymus glands from other lower organs and lower animals, excuse me. This is the liver, as I mentioned before, quite vital. It has 2 lobes, as you can see, and it performs all those functions. It gets rid of the damaged red blood cells. It helps store sugar and vitamin A, D, E, and K, the oil-soluble vitamins, as they call them. And when it is overworked by toxins, because all the drugs go to the liver first, alcohol, cocaine, heroin, and their food additives, preservatives, they all go to the liver first, where the liver tries to get rid of these toxins to the system, and that abuses the liver. When you take a preservative, the preservative's action in the food does not stop once it's in the body. It simply goes in the body and preserves or retards the ability of the organs to function. In other words, you're embalming your body when you take preservatives and additives. It decreases the function of the liver, the heart, and the brain, and especially the pineal gland. The pineal gland will see these impurities and create something that is called a melanin, and the melanin helps carry the impurities out of the body through the skin. It bonds with the bacteria and moves it out. However, when you take preservatives and additives, which were originally called behavior modifiers, and put them in your body, embalming it, you retard the action of the digestive system and retard the ability of the body to respond to life itself. So the liver gets very much damaged and abused by drugs, food additives, preservatives, dyes, white sugar, bleached white flour, and salt. And that's why the Europeans are turning to the thymus to help them out of the situation of not knowing how to eat. A very useful organ, the liver. It was once used in European culture in the place of the heart. They would say, "I love you with my liver," in the 13th century, because they believed the liver was the seat of all emotions and passions in the body. This is the thyroid gland here. We usually associate that with thyroxine, the thyroid gland. See, you see esophagus and see where it's sitting. Sometimes when it's abused, it swells up. When you don't have enough iodine, as they call it, thyroxine, this thyroid will get larger. And when you have too much, it gets larger. Most of the prepared pastries have iodinated wheat, bleached white flour, to help speed up the processing, so that whenever they're baking goods, there's highly iodinated. It has a lot of iodine in it, so we're getting a lot of excess iodine in our systems, which can also increase the size of the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland reacts to emotional strains in adolescence, and a large amount of it will, of course, weaken the organ altogether. So we have to be very mindful of this iodine that we're taking. Iodine is naturally happening in the plants that we eat, alfalfa and other plants, and we don't really need to take any excess of it. But again, that goes along with the abusiveness of the junk food diet. These are organs and glands that help along in the digestive process. That's why we're going over them, so we can get a basic understanding of our bodies. Here we go again. We're looking at the pituitary gland, as I mentioned before, and there's the hypothalamus. This is the third ventricle where the pineal gland is attached to. Here is the pineal gland right here, attached to the third ventricle. Why are we looking at this? Why are we looking at the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the pineal gland? Because digestion deals with rhythm. It's the rhythmicity, the clock that we're talking about once again. These organs do not function haphazardly. They function according to laws. And the law maker and the one that provides the clock and rhythm for how and when they function is the pineal gland. Hello. You can stop. Yeah, these rhythms are, as I mentioned before, mostly are a function of the pineal gland, which secretes the two major hormones that we call melatonin, which is done at night and is dark mediated, or stimulated by the electromagnetic force of the evening and night. And then we have the other hormone known as serotonin, which is daytime mediated or stimulated by the sun. The highest function of it will be between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. during the day. As for melatonin, it will be in the later evening after 11 o'clock up to about 3 to 6 o'clock in the morning for that peak, for the peak hour functioning for the melatonin. But however, they are functioning all the time. They just have their peak moments and their moments of decline or the moments of rest, because they work in a complementary pair as well. Now we'll look at some of the centers of chakra centers or melanin centers in the body, which are called by the Indian people the rainbow chakra centers, which is the rainbow melanin centers, which is how it should read. Now the organs, they operate under this clock, as I mentioned before, the pineal gland, which is a solar-centered kind of gland, which controls all the other lesser planets, as you would call them, in a zodiacal understanding of the system, which we will get into a little later. Now let me tell you about the times that the organs fire off again. The liver is optimum hour functioning is at 1 a.m. The lungs is at 3 a.m. The large intestines at 5 a.m. The stomach is at 7 a.m. The spleen is at 9 a.m. The heart is at 11 a.m. And then we have the small intestines at 1 p.m. The bladder is at 3 p.m. The kidneys at 5 p.m. And the regulator is at 7, which is the pineal gland, and the energy force field, which is again the pineal gland, is at 9, and the gallbladder is at 11 p.m. That's the circadian clock, or the daily 24-hour rhythm of the internal organs, and they must fire off in that sequence. And then we have them in a pictorial color form here on this chart, so you can see them much better. We have the pineal gland, pituitary, and we have the thyroid, and they're firing off in the sequence because the melanin is highly clustered here, and then it dissipates so it becomes thinner. We have melanin in various weights and flexibilities, which they call polymers. They act on various systems according to the electrical charge. If the charge is changed here at the thymus, then the melanin would come to the thymus to aid it. The melanin always comes when there is a weakness in the system. For instance, when you burn yourself, that area will become melanated, darker. Or when the center of the body here, the regenerative system of a pregnant woman gets very dark, because her regenerative system needs strength, so the melanin comes to strengthen it. So she will have a dark line going down the center of her body down to her solar or navel center. It becomes highly melanated, or the pregnant woman may get melanated face. That covers all those major glands around the pituitary, which is a regenerative or reproductive kind of gland. So the face will become melanated or darker during pregnancy. That's because of the sequence, the laws, the rhythm that are adhered to by these organ systems, as I mentioned before. The stomach, small intestines, all have a sequence of when they fire. Based on the alkalinity of the intestines, minerals are metabolized better in the evening. That's why you have the time of the intestines later on during the day, as I mentioned before, at 1 p.m. That's when you should eat your heaviest meal, your highest protein meal. It should be between 11 and 1 p.m. during the day, when this organ is functioning at its optimum and able to extract the sugar. So you're following the sequence of events. Then we get into the melatonin time later on in the evening, which is a spiritual kind of force field, electromagnetic force field, which surrounds the ovaries and the reproductive organs, testes as they call it, during the evening, because the electromagnetic force field changes, and that causes the melanin, the pineal gland, to behave differently, and it gives a more of a spiritual aura to the reproductive organs. That's why you find most of the highly spiritual rituals around the end of the year when the electromagnetic force of the earth changes. That's why you find Christmas and all of these holidays by the Muslim groups and the Jewish groups and the Christian groups, and those major European type of religions happen around this period of time by the earth's electromagnetic force field, which is related to the pineal gland's electromagnetic force field. Now we see that this is reflected even in the hands. We have this kind of rhythm that is involved in the hands. See, we have the fingertips, which is highly pineal gland orientated, and then we get into the pituitary reproductive kind of system of the fingers, because the fingers are giving birth just as other organs are giving birth. This part had to generate, so it generated, and it generated this system in a circular kind of fashion. But if you put both of the hands together, you will have the internal organs. That's why you have the right breast, the left breast, and the left lung, and the right lung. Because these two hands were together and they separated like a fan, forming two. And down the center would be the generative, how they were generated or made before they split. And then you have the kidneys and adrenal glands and the small intestines and the bladder. And when there's something wrong with these organs, the clock or the rhythmicity of them, it can be detected by putting, say, up to 2 pounds of pressure on it, which is about the same amount of pressure you use to put a stamp on an envelope. You put that amount of pressure on these points, and if you feel a little soreness or pain, that means that the rhythm of that organ is out. It means you have to treat the pineal gland. As I mentioned, we'll go to cola, ginkgo, blessed thistle, false unicorn, damiano, those glandular stimulating hormone herbs, along with the brain herbs, as I mentioned before, go to cola and ginkgo, to help stimulate the pineal gland. And then you treat this organ, the thymus gland, if it felt sore, with some lymphatic kind of draining herb, such as echinacea, for example. So when you put 2 pounds of pressure on it and you feel soreness, or you feel soreness at the kidney, then you have to use herbs to treat the kidney. Yuba ursi, buchu, kubi berries, herbs such as that to help treat the kidneys. And you also have to treat the pineal gland simultaneously, because that is the first line of defense for African people. So by putting 2 pounds of pressure on the hand, you can detect a weakness of that system, 5 pounds for a man. You can do the same thing for the foot to detect when the rhythmicity of the organ system is not functioning well as when the organs themselves also need to be cleansed or restored or regenerated. So you put, for example, you put about 5 pounds of your man on this small intestines on your foot, your left foot, which is known as your left mind as well. That's what the Europeans are called, left-minded people. Very logical, sequential, step-by-step kind of addictive thought process, whereas the right side is more creative, more conceptualized, more unified, more communal, more godly, and it's called the creative side, and African people are called right-minded people. And the right-minded people breathe deeper, whereas left-minded people breathe shallow, shallow breathing. So this foot not only represents the internal organs, but it represents the mind and the spirituality of the person, and it also represents the rhythmicity of the person's system. So if you put 5 pounds of pressure on a man, or 2 pounds of pressure perhaps on a woman, and you feel some irritation there, then you know you have to do something with your small intestine, cleanse it in some way. Perhaps use some slippery elm or Irish moss or some kind of mucus-forming herb to help wash it out, and maybe some red raspberry to strengthen it, or something of that sort, some papaya leaves, or some okra, or something to help regenerate the small intestine, which feeds the brain. That's how you go about treating the systems and using the pressure. Again, if you are not able to, or you don't have a good touch for that system, maybe you're better with visual things, because the illness can be detected by smell. People that have cancer have a certain smell. People that have diabetes has a certain smell. Diseases have a smell. They have a certain odor and color. As you can see from this rainbow chart, these organs, when they're ill, produce these colors. And they produce a different color change within the ices, as the Africans call it, or iris, as the Europeans call it, the color part of your eye. By looking at that part of your eye, or the whites in your eyes, you can find out what is wrong with the rhythm of your body, as well as the mind of your mind, as well as your spirit, as well as the physical organs themselves. So if you have a discoloration or a pointer vein, that's a red vein in the white part of your eyes right here, which is basically at about 4:30, you know it's something wrong with your spleen, and you need to treat your spleen with some sort of herb, yarrow perhaps, damiana, dandelion, and also treating the pineal gland simultaneously with the herbs that I mentioned before, such as gotu-kola and ginkgo, those herbs. You may have to use some bilberry to help treat the spleen, or some juniper berries to help treat the spleen. There are quite a few herbs that can be used to help treat the spleen when you have a pointer vein, a red vein pointing right here at 4:30. Or if you look into ices, which is called iris by the Europeans, and you see a pointer vein, you see a discoloration or break in the iris, then in this area you know you would have to treat the thyroid. Some people use kelp to do that. So you know you have to also reestablish the rhythm of the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland functions with a rhythmicity. To treat it and cleanse it and not to reestablish its rhythm is to keep it out of harmony. So we have to establish the rhythm. So by looking at the eyes, looking at the iris, looking at the whites of the eyes, you can find out whether the rhythm is off, or whether the spirituality is imbalanced, or whether the thinking is imbalanced. And that's kind of an overview of how these charts help you with your melanin balance. Now we're going to get back to the digestive system and some of the ways in which those organs in the digestive system function. We're going to look at the digestive organ, the hypothalamus. As we can see, it is pineal-centered or related, as we mentioned before. But the hypothalamus, here it is right here. It's used in digestion. The hypothalamus is used for water balance, helps you with sugar and fat metabolism, and the hypothalamus helps you with your thirst, stimulates your thirst. We had talked about the spleen earlier as a blood reservoir and has lymphatic nodes in it, what we call lymphatic fluids, parts of the spleen which help protect your body from infections and help produce red blood cells, and it stores blood in this reservoir. And the hypothalamus helps you with thirst, as I mentioned before, and water balance. And of course we have not only the hypothalamus, but we also have the thalamus gland itself, which I have not mentioned. And the thalamus stimulates all or nothing at all kind of stimulation. It's mostly olfactory kind of related. It's good for primitive things such as primitive sense of pain and crude touch and temperature. But all of this is related to the lungs. So we're dealing in a transportation system when we're dealing with digestion. The problem is transportation. As I mentioned before, the water's in the pipe or the hot air tube called the digestive system, but the water has to get out of the pipe into the house or into your temple. So we're transporting nutrients, and transportation of nutrients is done by enzymes. The enzymes help speed them up, break it down, and get the nutrients out of the tube into the body. We have lipase, which is the one that's lacking in diabetes mellitus. We have proteins, protease, enzymes that help break down protein. We have enzymes that help break down starches and sugars. And they all in complements with the lungs. The lungs and the large intestines work as a complement to repair. See, the large intestines takes out the water, extracts it from the food that has been broken down, and recycles the water in the body. It reabsorbs nutrients. But the reabsorbed nutrients have to have oxygenation, have to get air. So we have the cooling system, the oxygenation system of the lungs that works as a complementary pair with the large intestines. The lungs digest air, but we only think of breathing air, but the air cannot be taken into body in its crude form. It has to be broken down, which the Europeans don't call breaking it down. They call it in the alveolus, they call it the transported because of these nutrient exchange down in the lower part of the bronchioles and the bronchials and the brachials and all that sort of thing, the terms they give us. But down in here is where we have the air exchange from the carbon monoxide and the oxygen. This is the digestion of the air, how it's broken down into its smallest form so it can get into the body, just as the food is broken down in its smallest form in the digestive system so it can get into the bloodstream and into the body and out of that pipe, that hot air tube called the digestive system. Again, we're going to just briefly go over digestion as we went over before, where we masticate the food, chew it up, tell us in a liquid form, pass it on down into the stomach, and from the stomach the duodenum, where the liver puts in the bile, and the pancreas and the spleen help break down the food and is put into the small intestines, and from there it goes into the large intestines, into the rectum and out of the body, where the water is extracted and recycled, and the wastewater is taken out of the blood by the two kidneys, as we had talked about earlier. Two kidneys, they're not very clear on this graphic for you. And the water is taken out and the urine is taken out of the system in the form of waste and put in the bladder where it's released. And the problem still is digestion. Diverticulosis, we have ulcers when there's not enough fluid to give the mucosal lining to the stomach and the intestines, not enough fluid so the digestive enzymes can break down the skin where you have the accumulation of waste caused by constipation that causes the colon to lose its flexibility and causes constipation, where you're constantly dumping food into the body and not allowing the correct transit time. As I mentioned before, it takes 4 hours for the stomach to empty, so you should eat your meals according to that 4-hour schedule. The food stays in the stomach for 4 hours, and once it's emptied, then it can eat the next meal. So you're leaving 4 hours in between meals. We're not drinking and eating at the same time because that liquefies or decreases the ability of the digestive enzymes to break down food, and also adds to constipation and causes the body to be toxic. So we don't drink and eat, and we allow the correct transit time for the food to leave the stomach and get into the small intestine so it can be absorbed. But when you're stacking food and eating in between meals, it causes the food to stay in the stomach too long and results in constipation and the malfunctioning of the large intestines. All of this stems from the fact that we're not following the correct rhythm. The correct rhythm of eating is allowing the 4 hours between breakfast, lunch, and dinner if you're going to eat 3 meals, which lets the colon stay healthy and keeps it in this kind of condition, where it can pull out the nourishments to nourish the genital organs, the testes, the bladder, the prostate. But when it's not nourished properly by following the rhythmicity of the body, our body becomes ill. And the food no longer is a medicine, it is now destructive toward us. This is the problem with digestion. Following the laws, adhering to the rhythmicity of the body, which is pineal-centered, allowing the time between each meal, the 4-hour time period, thoroughly masticating the food, not drinking while eating, which causes the digestive enzymes to be weak. Those digestive enzymes that are made by the liver, made by the pancreas, which does the insulin, which we're most familiar with. And you will find that 90% of the illnesses in this country on the European diet are digestive related, such as diabetes mellitus, which is a pancreas disease. Then you have plaque or liquid manure that accumulates in the system. It gets into the veins, and you call it varicose veins. It gets into the lining inside of the arteries and narrows the arteries and decreases the food supply, and you have hardening of the arteries, and then you have thickening of the arteries, where waste is constantly accumulating in the system and not allowed to get out. And you have bumps that the body's attempt to eject waste by using bumps. And also you have the worms that are constantly floating in a constipated system. We're pushing against the skin, causing blackheads and whiteheads, which are also symptoms of worms, where you have parasites all over your body, sucking up at least a pint of blood a day, decreasing the amount of nutrients in which you have in your system. All of this happens because you're following a European enslaved diet, a diet that's made by companies whose first business is to stay in business. The European food industry is not geared for nutrition and help to uplift a black person's body and health and mind and well-being. It's meant as a tool of enslavement and control, because foods are chemicals and chemicals control. Foods influence the way you think, the way you act, and the way you behave. When your system is constipated, it's no longer functioning at its optimum level. So what we are being is merely slaves to the food industry. We have now put our stomachs in chains and put our nutritional value of our whole body into the hands of someone who does not concern themselves about our health whatsoever. The food industry, merely a business, not into nutrition at all, and in no way, shape, and form concerned about the melanin content of an African person's body. The diet itself is anti-melanin. The diet, it does not involve the rhythm of the organs, does not involve the rhythm of the plants. Foods are combined that should not be combined. As I mentioned before, vegetables go with protein, vegetables go with fruits, vegetables go with starches. You cannot mix protein and starches together. When you mix protein and starches together, the starches burn at a different time than the proteins, and the starches burn quicker, which causes the proteins to ferment and spoil. We are, again, back to this whole business of rhythm. We are very rhythmic because we have a higher melanin content. We are very rhythmic people because we have a high melanin content. We are not born dancers, we are born melanated. And it's the melanin which we have to be concerned with. And when we're eating a constipated diet, which causes the mucus to accumulate in the system instead of passing out of the system, it causes the calcium not to be recycled and the protein not to be recycled, which is a characteristic of highly melanated people known as African people. We have to get away from the slave's diet, the mentality of eating all of this greasy food, which comes out of the 10,000 years ago ice age of the Europeans. They used to going through periods of stuffing themselves and making their bodies ill health with fat, which is a fat disease, large pouches, so they can prepare themselves for their long winters, short summers, short falls, and long winters. So they had to gorge themselves and stuff themselves so they could be prepared for the long winters and eat a lot of greasy food. But we are not in that kind of a shape physically. Because of our digestive flora in our stomach, we break down food differently, carbohydrates, proteins, and starches differently. All we need to do to be healthy is eat tropical fruits, as the Europeans call them. Back to the roots, back to our African diet of fruits, papayas, mangoes, bananas, plantains, apricots, peaches, grapes, pears, plenty of fruits, even the green fruits, squashes, cucumbers, peppers, back into the okra, beans, peas, those are the green fruits, back into a high water content diet. When you lose about 5% of your water content, you're losing about 20 to 25% of your energy. Just drinking that least amount of water decreases your energy level. Water is very important for African people and very important for all people for that matter. So by decreasing your water supply by about 5%, I mean drinking plain water. I don't mean substituting water and say, since I drank a soda or some apple juice or some pear juice, I don't have to drink water. Plain water will increase your energy level. It's very important because everything floats in this water. The blood floats in it. So by just recapturing the African diet, we don't have to go into, should this food go with that food? Should I eat this with that? And go into these timings, because our instinct to eat will be natural. It won't be controlled by these chemical companies. So having a basic understanding of diet and a basic understanding of nutrition and a basic understanding of how the body works, and you're masticating and eating the food and let it pass to your stomach and large intestines, helps to defend your body, helps to make you more healthy, and helps to make you more African. This has been a brief overview of nutrition and health and how to eat properly. And I hope you follow this. Thank you.